What's up, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Mind Your Mental Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Raquel Martin, licensed clinical psychologist, professor, scientist, podcast host. If you're here to learn. So today we're talking about grief. You know, I find that grief is one of the most, I don't want to say one of the most, yeah, I can say one of, because I didn't say the misunderstood concepts when it comes to health and well-being. I also think, of course, it's a very uncomfortable concept because we don't always know how to provide care to people who are grieving. It's deeply personal to so many people. I am someone who will be grieving probably in some way, shape, or form for like the rest of my life. I have a twin sister, Andrea, and she became sick and disabled. I'm 36, so I think we're going on a decade now. Hit us out of nowhere. She had just completed, was it her master's program? And then it was me or my mom. I think it was my mom. She got a call in the middle of the night that from her boyfriend that like something was going on with Andrea, and she went to the doctor, and she has this incredibly rare neurological and autoimmune disorder. And now she's disabled, and she is going to require care for the rest of her life. And that is actually one of the main reasons why I started therapy, because like the grief was just too much to bear. Like it was a lot. I was doing my PhD program, ridiculously exhausted, crying every single step of the day, like feeling survivor's remorse. Like, why is she sick? Why am I not sick? And one of the biggest things I had to understand and accept, I understood it from like the other side of the couch of grief, but not having talked about it as much personally. Because honestly, at the time, I didn't have a ridiculous amount of clients who were dealing with grief, but more so in a different way. Like a lot of my clients were dealing with assault and trauma. So I knew it in that realm. Part of me thinks that like the reason why I don't know, I think clients are sent to you for a certain reason. So maybe I wouldn't have been able to handle them at that point. But after going through that experience, so many clients who are dealing with grief in similar ways. But I had to acknowledge the fact that like, I'm going to be grieving for the rest of my life. There's actually never going to be a time, and I have come to terms with this, and I have accepted this, I think, which makes it easier, that I will be like 100% happy. It's never going to happen. Because at the end of the day, the only thing that would make me 100% happy is my sister no longer being sick. So like my wedding day, amazing, incredibly happy day. But part of me was also sad that my sister was sick. Having my boys, amazing. Some of the best days of my life, not because of the care, because the care I received was awful and the deliveries were terrible. But understanding that like the relationship that my boys have with my sister, which is still great. My youngest like will just scream auntie across because like part of it is like it affects her hearing. And he'll just scream auntie across the house. Like, oh, you won't listen to me. Like, I know you clearly have an issue with hearing. So I'm a scream louder. Like, still has a great relationship. But understanding that like it's not what I pictured. And so I am one of the people who I think I just understand. And I think most people, if they understood this, maybe wouldn't say the wrong thing, but would be okay with sitting with the grief. Because I think sometimes we rush to say stuff when the sitting with the grief is tough. I said, I'm going to be grieving for the rest of my life. I'm going to be grieving for the rest of my life. There's never going to be a time where I'm 1000% happy because my sister is sick. And I think it's important to realize that grief doesn't need some form of closure to be valid. If you guys follow me on social media, you realize I don't believe in like closure when it comes to external closure. Like you have to forgive yourself for scenarios, but like thinking you're going to get closure from someone else, I don't think that's possible. But when you understand that it's something that people may possibly deal with for the rest of their lives and sitting with them in those strong emotions, I think you are less likely to try to solve it. And I think sometimes people try to solve it. Like, can I do this? What can I do to make you feel less bad? And the answer is nothing. You can't do anything to make me feel less bad. You might be able to do something to make my house less cluttered, which would honestly help me out in a specific way, but nothing. So if you realize that you can't do anything to make me feel less bad, and all I need is possibly your presence, maybe it also helps you to feel less likely to try to fix it. Because some people just try to fix it. And grief it's for most people lifelong. It's not like an up and down kind of, it's not like a straight path. It's, carrying a bag. Some days it's like a 50-pound rucksack. Some days it's like a Brandon Blackwood clutch. Like some days it's big, sometimes it's small, but like it can resurface out of nowhere, like knock you on your knees. I think one of the biggest things that my clients who I've worked with grief have talked about is like, it's not the really big moments that surprise them with sadness. Like, oh, I wish they were here for this wedding, or I wish they were here for um, this, I don't know, this movie they would have loved, or not even this movie, or this wedding, or this birth. It's like the smaller tasks, like something big happened, or something little happened, or I saw their favorite bird and I go to call them and I can't call them, and I just want to call them, or oh, I just had a good sandwich and they would have loved this, and I just can't share that sandwich with them. Like it's not always like the big things. It's also the things that are just every day that you would have had if their presence was here. And because it's not linear and because there are no specific stages, I would be remiss if I did not acknowledge the fact that like so many times people will talk about the different stages of grief. Different stages of grief are widely misapplied. Not created. It was developed as a result of research because it is research based. It's not something that people just like made up. For individuals who were terminal, dealing with their own terminal illness. It was not for people who are family members or dealing with the impact of someone else's terminal illness. It wasn't for the people who were mourning others. It was individuals mourning the loss of their life and understanding implications of knowing that their life was going to end eventually and sooner than expected, right? Because they were dealing with terminal illness. And because of that, I feel as though people have like pretty unrealistic expectations on how loss should be processed. If they can't go from they went from grief to acceptance, but then or is it anger to acceptance? And then they went back to anger. They're like, well, wait, this isn't the way it's supposed to be. I can't even grieve right. And that's because a lot of times people are applying it to a model that was never meant for them in the first place. So that's just one thing. Like the stages of grief, a lot of times people are applying it in a different way. And it can make the journey harder for you. But I also think we struggle a lot with grief, with acknowledging our emotions, because that's kind of like what I mentioned in a different episode about like dehumanization, and humanity is messy and it has a bunch of emotions and a bunch of feelings. And if you have been taught so long to sublimate your feelings, you're not allowed to have them because you're not human. You're just like property. So you're not allowed to have emotions. You should just be happy to just be here. It's harder to not only acknowledge the emotions, but address, because you can't address what you can't acknowledge. You can't acknowledge what you haven't been, you can't address what you can't address what you don't acknowledge, and you can't acknowledge what you haven't been educated to see. And whether it is something that, it's not like we have a class on denying our emotions, but the blueprint has always been there. Whether it's through family members that tell themselves to suck it up instead of crying, whether it's through watching our parents like work through pain and think they have to earn rest. Like the blueprint has always been there to deny our feelings, right? Even if we don't think we're stating it, like we watch it in the first place. So I think that's another reason why grief can be so tough, is because if you're dealing with a culture of individuals, Black people, you're dealing with a culture of individuals who have been taught that their feelings don't matter and their humanity doesn't matter. And grief is the epitome of humanity. You're hurting because you miss that person, because you want them around. It's a green flag of the love that you shared or had for that individual every single day, because you feel the loss of their presence not being here. How do you deal with that when you're in a culture of people who are been told to just suck it up? And then how you also deal with that in ways that like maybe you haven't been told different types of grief. Like one thing that I think a lot of Black people deal with is like I would say disenfranchised grief, like the grief of that's not often recognized or validated by society, but the grief of not being recognized or validated by society in the first place, like being a part of a disenfranchised group, a group that is historically excluded and pushed to the margins, right? The shared grief, it's collective grief, but the shared grief of a community, right? Of individuals who've had their history taken from them and have to deal with violence and who are just trying to be and exist, and the grief that has to deal with that. I think one of the reasons why it can be hard to acknowledge grief is because I think if we as a people had the time and energy to deal with the grief and acknowledge it, maybe there's a question that we wouldn't be able to get up under the weight of it. Because it's heavy. It's heavy being Black. It's not heavy being Black. Let me correct myself. The racism that gets placed on Black people is heavy. Being Black is not heavy. I would say it's light. It's not the fact that we're Black. It's the fact that the racism that y'all put on us because of our Blackness. If y'all would just let us be, we'd be light as a feather, just shining, skin glowing, just smelling like sunshine. You know what I'm saying? So let me correct that, because it's one of the reasons why I always say there's no such thing as race-based stress. There's racism-based stress. There's nothing wrong with me. Like, there's nothing stressful about being Black. It's about the racism that's placed on Black people, right? Because if you think to it, the stressful things that you possibly attribute to being Black is actually about about racism. It's not about being Black. If you didn't have to worry about segregation and inequality with pay, if you didn't have to worry about not getting access to healthcare, if you didn't have to worry about them cutting Medicare, Medicaid, if you were actually getting paid a comparable wage and your children were actually going to schools that had funding, if you didn't have to worry about being stopped just for driving, if you didn't have to worry about walking around shops because you're going to be followed, you would not. It's racism. It's not race. There's no such thing as race-related stress, in my opinion. But when it comes to the grief, that disenfranchised grief, that collective grief, I think sometimes we don't acknowledge it, because I think we don't acknowledge it at times because it's like, maybe we feel like we couldn't get up from the weight of it. But then I can also understand the fact that being of a people who always had to like work and work and work and have a reason for doing things, I can see a lot of people being like, so what's that going to do? I was at the store the other day and I asked someone how they were doing, and they said, I could complain, but no one would care. And I was like, oh my gosh, probably a normal person would have like let that slide, which as an occupational hazard, I was like, what do you mean? And I'm sitting here like, girl, get your produce and leave. We're at the grocery store. You over here. This is not a session. But like, I'm an emotional person. So someone saying like, I could complain, but no one would care. I'm like, do you not have anyone? Do you have access to resources? Like, I can't even. It's like an occupational hazard. Don't tell me something is wrong, because we're going to sit down and have a conversation. I'm going to link you with somebody who can help. There's somebody, okay? That somebody might be you. We may just need some affirmation. I may need to just give you some resources, or I may need to link you with a clinician, but you're not about to. I just felt so bad. And also, like, that's an awful thing to say. Not because she can say what she want to say. That's how she feel. That's how she feel. But like, for that to be we have plenty of awful statements. The kill two birds with one stone. I would love to meet the person who made that statement up. Are you okay? To kill two birds with one. Is that the goal? But but yeah, I could complain, but no one would care. Oh gosh. I was just like, oh my goodness, it's really hard, But as coming from a people who probably have a similar mindset, I can see why they'd be like, so what you want me to do with this grief? It's like when I have older people in therapy. When I have older people in therapy and they would come to session, like, all right, now we're not about to have this 50 minutes of talking. You and I ain't getting nothing from it. We got a solution or something, like you won't fix it. It's just you're not about to waste an older Black person's time. Like, if the age range, they'd be like, so what we gonna do? Talk? You want me to just talk? Oh God. Oh, I told my daughter I would come. So it's just very funny. But coming from a people who very much are used to coming from working until working, and there has to be a reason. Like, there has to be something tangible they can take from it. I can see why many Black people don't want to talk about the realm of grief, because it's just like, well, what is that going to do for me? Well, holding emotions in and having not acknowledging the stresses you're dealing with actually contributes to more difficulties with your nervous system regulating itself. It's actually one of the main reasons why we're more susceptible to autoimmune disorders. I shouldn't have to give you the physical impact of you denying your mental health difficulties for you to take it seriously. But mental health has never not been physical health. Physical health has never not been mental health. You might as well call them physical health or for mental health. They're the same. It's the same thing. The same thing. You got sleep apnea. You think you're not going to be irritable? That's mental health. You have depression. You think you're going to feel like eating vegetables? That's physical health. You know what I'm saying? Like, they've never not been linked in the first place. So I can see, anyone who's like, what's talking about my grief going to do? Probably make you less susceptible to autoimmune disease and decrease your blood pressure. If that helps, but addressing it will also take something off your plate. And not take it off your plate like it'll go away, but I think sometimes the stress is also like holding it in without having someone to talk to. I think a lot of times we also may, as a people, keep grief in because we may not have a trustworthy resource. And that's why therapy can also be helpful. And I think there's also different levels of grief that we are dealing with that more people need to acknowledge. I've been seeing a lot about grief of loss of friendships, sadness from friendships ending or changing or evolving. So many people around me are going through different lifestyle changes, and the people that were with them in the club are not the people that are with them at the baby shower. And sometimes you evolve past people. Sometimes you also have unrealistic expectation about individuals' capabilities, and you think everyone is supposed to be able to serve you in every way, shape, and form in every phase of your life, and that's not true. So I also think it's important to realize that, like, it's like, say you went out on a date with someone and you're asking them about their relationships, and they said every single one of their exes was crazy. Every single one of your exes is crazy. It's an odd statement to say for the only commonality is you. Don't finish that. Don't finish the appetizer. Leave. You know what I'm saying? Like, so it's just, I also think when sometimes I'll listen to grief of friendships, and a lot of them are reasonable, but some of them are not. And everyone can't be everything to you. I think there's also the grief of lost opportunities. Like, if you're feeling you're dealing with unfulfilled dreams or life plans. And a lot of times I have seen parents deal with this grief by possibly forcing their children or children around them into a life that they wanted. But I do want people to understand that, like, legacy shouldn't just be like the tangible, like the jobs and the titles. It can also be like your legacy is the stories that people have after you pass away, and knowing that you brought joy into the room every single day. I think that's the ultimate trick of thinking that, like, your legacy is just like your body of work. But I would love it if my legacy was the people who, in addition to like my body of work, which is really important to me, but like, oh, she always had a smile on her face. It ain't gonna be that. It's not gonna be that. It can be like, I liked her laugh. It ain't gonna be that. I ain't always have a smile on my face, especially since when I'm thinking, my face be looking like I'm about to punch somebody in the face. Like, my thinking face is crazy, but it ain't gonna. No, but that might be for someone else. But it could be, it could be the way that you leave people feeling, like happiness and joy and stuff like that. I also think it's important to realize that you can grieve the right decision as well. You can grieve the fact that, like, being with this person wasn't right for you anymore, but you still miss that. And a lot of times that's a grief of, like, you're grieving not only them not being in your life, but you're grieving the future that you thought you might have with them. You can grieve the right decisions too. You can know in your heart of hearts that was not the person for you to be with anymore, and it still sucks, right? Um, and I also, when it comes down to it, there's this diagnosis in the DSM. It's like complicated grief, or it's like when depression goes past 2 years. I think it's 2 years. It's darn it, dysthymia. When grief goes past a certain amount of time, they call it like complicated grief or something like that. But I've never really liked that term, because when we think it's like prolonged or intense grief that disrupts daily life. I don't think there's any particular way to grieve. So, if you feel as though you need additional assistance dealing with it mental health wise, I'm always going to advocate for a clinician. But I will also state that, like, there's no one way to grieve. It evolves over time. Um, it evolves over time. And I think when we set unrealistic expectations on how we should process loss, it makes it that much more difficult. I think it can also be in addition to, dealing with the own rituals of letting people go. And I don't even think it's letting people go. You can let them go from the physical realm, but also acknowledge the fact that parts of them are with you, right, in the first place. Like, because you knew them, and some things that they may have say, you may hear their voice. In addition to possible funerals or viewings, it may also be helpful for you to have your own ritual for how you honor your grief. Like, whether it's having like a nice meal that they would have loved, or if they were that person who told you to, like, you are to dress up because you are the special occasion, maybe you make it a point to, like, wear the outfits that are more special occasion because you are the special occasion. But I think it can be helpful to come up with your own rituals of grief in the first place, because there's no specific way to grieve. And it all starts with acknowledging the difficulties that you're having in the first place. But yeah, grief is incredibly difficult. If you get nothing from this episode, realize there's no one right way to grieve. And I will say, if you're someone who's not ridiculously touchy-feely, because I think I have more touchy-feely people around me, but when I was younger, I don't really think I did. if you're thinking of a way that you're trying to provide care for someone who is dealing with grief and you're struggling with with the emotional piece and you don't have the capacity to do that. When people are grieving, when people are having a difficult time, it is that much harder for them to care for themselves or care for their home. So maybe something tangible that you can provide to them that may be easier for you to have the capacity for. Maybe sending them meals, maybe, I don't know, sending a laundry service or helping them with their laundry. And not in the way of like, ooh, child, this place a mess. I know you sad. In the way of like, oh, I just want to be able to help you in this way. Because when we think about capacity, maybe some people will get to the point where they're able to sit there and listen and not say the most ridiculous thing. And maybe they're working on that, but they're not there yet. And they still want to provide you with care. If you know that's something that you're working on, because you should also work on the fact if you feel discomfort with people's emotions and stuff like that, and you're always providing solutions, you can't provide support if that's a concern. But you can also try to provide support in a way that works for you and them while you're in the meantime of working on that. So activities of daily living stop when people are grieving and having difficult times. So that's cleaning, that's cooking. That's a lot of things. So maybe you can help them in that sense. Because I'm around a lot of touchy-feely people now, but I was not backing up from Philly. So tangible stuff can also be helpful. All right, y'all. Thank you so much for tuning into another episode of Mind Your Mental. Please let me know how you feel about the show. Please leave reviews. And remember to be kind to yourself. 2 steps forward and 1 step back is still 1 step forward. That's just math. Have a good rest of your day.